7 years ago, a catastrophe broke out when a terrifying disaster called a dungeon break took place. There were hundreds of monsters that were set loose, and because of that, so many people suffered. Han Sung-yun's parents also passed away in that tragic incident, and the poor guy was a child at that time and he lost everything. However, he made a pledge to himself while crying bitterly that he would become a hunter one day to avenge his parents' death. He would rip the monsters apart and kill them. 7 years later, in the Catastrophe Memorial Park, Han sat dejected because he was kicked out of the Hunter Training Center. Earlier that day, the chief trainer told him that he was no longer a hunter. The trainer says that those who get awakened get a few months to complete their training in an exclusive training hall. However, Han has already exceeded that training period, as it has been 7 years and Han's talents are nothing but trash. The trainer further says that if he let him stay further, the reputation of their training center would be affected. However, the trainer thinks that Han is persistent, since he comes for training every morning. All the other trainees also mock Han for being good for nothing. In fact, Han's stats haven't increased at all during those last 7 years, despite acquiring unique traits and skills. While Han is sulking at the park, he hears a young woman boosting her little daughter's morale and tells her not to give up no matter what happens. Han hears this, perks up from the bench, salutes her, and off he goes. Han keeps on thinking about how he endured all that rubbish in the past 7 years. He also vows that he won't give up. He reaches the trainer's house and knocks on his door. The trainer gets furious when he sees Han and asks him to go back. Han pleads with him to let him take the hunter's exam just once more. The trainer gets angrier and says that he knows why Han is here. He wants a membership refund since he learned nothing at his training center. Han furiously bellows that it's nothing about money. To his shock, the trainer punches him hard and Han is sent flying, crashing the garbage cans. The trainer calls him a failure again. At this point, a status window appears and says that the Tower of Trials is praising your iron will. Somehow, Han is caught in deep waters and is unable to breathe. The trainer turns around to beat him more, but is astonished to find that Han has vanished in thin air. The Tower of Trials asks him to select the difficulty level and tells him that the rewards he would get would be directly proportional to the difficulty level he chooses. Han chooses hard as he wants to seize the opportunity. Soon he is told that he would enter the first floor of the tower. He finds himself in a desert and soon a sword appears in front of him. Han is told that he would get a unique trait as a reward, and this gets him all excited. For the challenge, a sand golem appears and Han is supposed to survive that golem in a limited allocated time of 10 minutes. Finally, the penalty for failing the challenge is death. The sand golems are no jelly beans and are powerful, terrible monsters that could crush their victims by rolling them under their feet. Poor Han keeps on running away in terror as he still doesn't know what to do. Then for a moment, he thinks that he can escape the sand golem by running like that. The mighty Sandy is slow, but because of his size appears faster. However, Han thinks that if he keeps on fleeing for 9 minutes, he'll lose stamina soon. He thinks that he has been given a sword for a purpose. Either he dies fighting or he dies by running. He still is frightened because he doesn't know how to defeat that sand monster. But then Han hears demeaning voices of this trainer and his co-trainees belittling him for his failures. In his thoughts, even they feel like big sandy monsters ready to pounce on him with their giant feet. Han thinks about whether he'll die a pathetic death just by running away. However, Han thinks that he wants to be the greatest hunter in the world, so he won't give up. In fact, he knows better than most hunters in the world. He suddenly remembers that monsters like Golem lose their strength when their cores are destroyed, but the problem is that their cores are hidden, and it's very difficult to locate them. He then tries to strike the monster, repetitively targeting its core. He then finds an area highlighted in a shade of crimson to the left side of the monster. He tries hitting it with his sword, but the area is really hard. When he's about to hit it again, the sand monster grabs him tightly in his fist. Han is badly injured and flooded with negative thoughts again. However, he musters up all his courage and plunges his sword into the core of the monster. Han successfully destroyed the sand golem in just 2 minutes and 52 seconds. Although Han is badly injured, he couldn't believe his eyes that he had actually killed the golem. A status window appears congratulating him for clearing the first trial, and for the rewards he gets his unique traits unlocked and fast healing capability. He also receives 1,000 points. Han thinks that he had actually worked hard for 7 years but couldn't understand why he received mockery and treachery all those years. He also receives a unique trait of necromancy. Soon there appears a black fog where the golem died, and Han receives options on the status window on whether he wants to absorb the golem's spirit. Han clicks the yes button and absorbs the spirit of the golem. By doing this, his proficiency increases by 7%. He has absorbed one of the 5 spirits, and he can store them and use them whenever he wants. By doing this, he can permanently increase the stats, which he hasn't been able to do for the past 7 years despite rigorous training. His strength is increased by 3 points, while his health is also increased by 2 points. Han is excited because he feels that if he returns with all these exceptional qualities, he can easily become a hunter. However, he's told to wait in a waiting room, which means he cannot get out until he has completed all his trials. It's a do-or-die thing. As he enters the portal, he's thrown to the ground with a thud that badly injures him. However, in a blink of an eye, he recovers quickly, as if nothing has happened. Han looks around and sees a single bed in a large room. He drops on the bed and thinks about what he's supposed to do now. He thinks about whether he could escape the tower and then wonders for what purpose he has been summoned to this tower. A status window appears in front of him showing him 5 commands: info, store, community, inventory, and trial. The window states that saying those commands will activate them. Han chooses trial and another appears stating that the time left for the second trial is 23 hours and 21 minutes. However, not much is shown about the trial. Han chooses community, and soon he enters a chat room where other players are also frantically talking about their experiences. Han guesses that all players are really confused and people who aren't even Hooters are forcefully brought here. Soon the chat is interrupted by admin XXX. The admins tell all that they would be shown how to use the points earned, as the points are used as currency within the Tower of Trials. Points may be exchanged in the community as well. Users are warned that they won't be able to get a drop of water in the tower without points, and points are earned through trials. Han tries his best to memorize all the rules. The admin logs out after giving instructions. Han looks around and finds the same sword lying around, but he chooses store from the menu and gets the required equipment for training. Han thinks that since all the players lost their stats when they entered the tower, however, it could be easier to learn the previous skills by training. However, the healing effect of the waiting room was quite effective for Han's training. When Han felt hungry, he checked out the inventory to buy some food. After that, he had only 40 points left. After a while, it was only 17 minutes and 17 seconds for the next trial. Han vows that he would survive the next trial as well. Soon a portal opened and Han was shown options to enter the next trial. He clicks yes and enters the portal. This time he has entered a forest and the subject is assassination. Han is given the task to assassinate the orc tribe leader in a tribe swarming with orcs within a given time limit. Han stealths towards the tribe of terrifying orcs and ponder that normally in a dungeon there is a guard amongst the orc tribe or a hunter. Han thinks that since there are a lot of orcs in the tribe, so in order to defeat them a team of E-rank hunters is required to make sure one doesn't die. Han decides to retreat for a time in order to come up with an action plan. He then has an idea to finish up the trial. He lights up a wooden torch and decides to light enough firewood. Han observes his opponents and thinks that although orcs appear lazy but still work in an organized way, the hunters always hunt in the morning and return when the sun starts to set, which would give Han ample amount of time to complete his trial. Han decides that the only way to complete these very difficult tasks is with fire. Han thinks that according to the Hunters Association, the orcs are not always guarding their places, they return to their villages for taking breaks or to eat. Han then closes the whole village with a fire outbreak so that hunters from outside are unable to return. Then he decides to kill at least 2 workers. Han kills one of the orc workers and absorbs its spirit. His proficiency has increased to 9%. Han is then attacked by a guard orc. So with the help of the stored spirits, Han attacks back and thus his permanent stats rise. Strength is increased by 4 and agility is increased by 2. Han pins down the guard and his recovery skill is revitalized and also his stamina is increased by 4. Now he has to kill 3 workers, 1 guard, and the orc leader. Because of absorbing the guard's spirit, the workers are not a threat to Han anymore. However, the second guard is a treacherous one. However, Han is also persistent, so the guard then stops guarding its leader. After defeating the last obstacle, Han heads towards slaying the clan leader. The clan leader is no piece of cake and throws stashes of fire at Han. However, Han survives that by using his shield and achieves the one who endured fire title, and his skill of fire resistance get created. Han lunges forward toward the clan leader with a new spirit. Soon Han and the chief orc have a terrible face-off and both fight diligently. However, Han steps forward and cuts both hands off the chief. The chief runs towards his tent in terror and hides. Slowly and gradually, Han arrives at the tent opening and peeks inside. He sees 2 child orcs clinging to the chief, who is apparently their father. The children are crying bitterly. Soon one of the children approaches Han, kneels down and touches his leg, and a wave of pity washes over Han, who asks them if those guys also value family. Han has a flash of the past when his parents were being killed, and they told Han to run away and save his own life. Lost in his thoughts, Han comes to the present when he sees the cunning child orc taking out a sword from his back and is about to attack him. However, Han is too quick for him and attacks him back with his sword. Han says that even if he becomes a ghost, he would cut the monster's bloodline. He successfully kills them all and completes the second trial. After the trial, Han discards his old shield because it's all destroyed. This time he thinks he got a narrow escape from the second trial, and also through a chat room he comes to know that half of the members died in the trial. One of the members says that he got out of the tower to the earth by using his question voucher. Han quickly uses the information command, which says that he could write his questions to the moderator, and the moderator will then send him a reply. After every trial, he would receive a question voucher. Through the chat room, Han also finds out that there's a temporary return stone for sale that he could use to return to Earth for a couple of days. When he completes the 5th floor, also beyond the 7th floor, an extensive system expansion will occur. However, the items that could permanently send him to Earth are already sold. However, Han thinks that if he could return to Earth with his current abilities, he could easily become an A-rank hunter. However, Han decides to stay positive and thinks that his stats were nothing when he came to the tower. He then decides to absorb the 5 spirits and strength overflows, escalating his stats further. He then buys a big dead shield for 2,100 points. The shield was created by a black mage from a big dead tree, so when one's stamina is dropped, a buffer is created. Han also buys a black steel dagger to improve his fight level. The dagger is made from black steel that has absorbed dark magic. Lastly, he buys an assassin's cape, which would increase the movement speed by 1 minute. However, it will take 24 hours to cool down. The cape would also increase the user's stats by 5 when his agility skill is under 50. Next, Han decides to get used to his new equipment before the 3rd trial. Soon he enters the portal of the 3rd trial and finds himself under a deep, dark cave. This time the subject is a duel with the Guardian of Darkness. Han is prepared as the Guardian can attack from any side. However, to his horror, his doppelganger emerges from within himself. It seems that Han is having a terrifying face-off with his own menacing shadow. The Guardian attacks Han first, and if Han hadn't moved, it would have cut his spine.